Right. Hi, everyone. A huge welcome. This is the DoorDash Technical Showcase event. We're excited to talk about how to combat burnout, imposter syndrome, technical communications, and work-life balance today. All right. So to get us started, I want to introduce you to the format. We will have we'll have three presentations and then a Q&A session at the end. For the Q&A session, please add your questions to chat and we'll get to them at the end. All right, let's get started.
Cool. Hi everyone. Thanks for joining today. My name is Grace. I'm an engineering manager here at DoorDash, and today I'm going to be talking about ways to overcome imposter syndrome when starting a career in tech. So a bit about me before we get into it. I studied computer science at the University of Chicago, did multiple tech internships when I was there, then worked at Uber as my first job out of college, and then various companies from there, including Bird, and of course here at DoorDash. And while this seems like it was a smooth journey from end to end, there are definitely difficult times along the way. When I was looking for internships, it was actually a very difficult process, definitely many rejections and failed interviews. And from that, I felt like in my first internship, I really had to prove myself that I deserved to be in that role and that I wasn't a fraud. I also had many mentors early in my career that helped me feel like I belonged in the industry. And today I have the opportunity to mentor a lot of people who are early in their career and have shown me that the experiences that I had earlier in my career are universal and more similar. So just a little bit about where this talk comes from. So as I mentioned, as I've been mentoring other people, I've seen it's more universal that people are feeling imposter syndrome than I had previously understood. And I want to have the forum to share out the advice that I give to them to a broader audience than just those that I personally have the time to mentor. And so I'd say that even if you don't feel like you're experiencing imposter syndrome, more likely than not, you know someone or work with someone who does. And so hopefully the ways that we'll go over here, you can help empathize with them or help them overcome this. And I've also given this talk at Grace Hopper last year. There's also a blog post about this on the DoorDash engineering blog post website. So you can look up these resources after. So let's get into it. What is imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome, also called perceived fraudulence, involves feelings of self-doubt, personal incompetence that persist despite your education, experience, and accomplishments. So what are indications that you could be experiencing imposter syndrome? One is you could be feeling less confident in your role and your abilities. You could also be less likely to take on challenges and risks because you don't want others to see you as a fraud or notice that you don't have the full ability. You could also be feeling self-doubt and incompetence, and also feeling not cut out for the role. There are also workplace interactions that can either jumpstart or exacerbate these symptoms of imposter syndrome. So those include, you could be interrupted during a meeting and lose your train of thought or confidence. It could also be peers assuming someone else is leading the project rather than you, who you are in fact leading. And it could also be being assigned the tasks that no one else wants to do, such as taking meeting notes or planning team events. So given the definition and some of this description, have any of you experienced imposter syndrome? If you have, should be a raise button or raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen if you just want to click that so I can get a quick gauge. Cool, yeah, well, thanks for doing that. And definitely seems like we have a handful of people who are experiencing this. So let's dive into ways that we can overcome. So actually, before we do that, the reason why we want to address imposter syndrome, one is if someone is experiencing imposter syndrome, they're most likely not growing their skill sets. This means that they're not either learning new skills or deepening their skills, which in turn can also stunt their future career growth because those who are not taking on the challenges or learning and deepening their skills are most likely not moving up the career ladder or moving into senior positions. And this could also mean that people will feel the need to leave their role, the company, or the industry if they're not comfortable in their position. So let's talk about ways to overcome imposter syndrome. I bucket my advice into two main categories. One is to manage expectations, and the second is to partner with a mentor. So let's start with manage expectations. Here are 4 framings that I like to use when talking about managing expectations. I'll start with the first, which is the journey versus the progress. So with a lot of people that I mentor who are early on in their career, I noticed that a lot of them are constantly looking forward. So they might have just finished a big project or got their job or accomplished something major, but their eyes are always forward. There's another mountain to climb, one that's probably taller than the one that they just overcame. And I like to remind them to look back on the challenges that they have overcome. They've most likely been resilient in overcoming challenges and had skill sets to, and gained skill sets to just improve their learning. So I think they forget to appreciate their past accomplishments and are only looking forward and what's next and what's scary and daunting. And I think if they can look back and appreciate what they've accomplished in the past, this can help fuel them forward. The second framing I like to use is around pacing. So I like to take an analogy from running, comparing a sprint race versus a marathon. So in a sprint, someone is running a short distance as fast as they can with using all their energy at once, versus in a marathon, a runner is trying to pace themselves so that they can finish the race at a sustainable pace. So if we look at this in a career perspective, if someone is operating at a sprint mentality, they're most likely ramping up very fast on projects. So they just got to a company or trying to learn very quickly, or they're on a new project, a new team, just trying to learn everything they can as soon as possible, but they could be skipping key foundational learning steps. Another way to think about a sprint is also trying to deliver on projects ahead of time or on time, and maybe working long hours or pulling all-nighters just to get that done. Whereas if we think about a career more on a marathon perspective, you want to go at a pace that you can sustain for a long amount of time and hopefully be able to travel further as a result of that. The third framing I like to use is setting appropriate goals. So I think a lot of people come in with very high expectations, such as being promoted very quickly or having some big short-term wins, such as large impact numbers. But I like to have people focus on more realistic and what I would say is fulfilling goals, such as developing core skill sets or fostering their interests within the workplace. And the last framing I like to use is understanding that everyone started somewhere. So people who are new to the role, there's definitely steep learning curves and being in an unfamiliar environment. And they might notice that other people on their team are able to triage issues faster or just seem to know a lot more than they do. But mostly the experienced people, whether it be them at the company longer or been in the industry longer, they're able to pattern recognize usually because they've seen similar issues in the past and can apply what they've learned before to the current situation, and they have strong foundations to build on. So just to go over managing expectations, it's important to understand the progress that you've made and not just always looking forward to what's next. You want to treat your career as a marathon so that you go at a pace that is sustainable. You also want to set appropriate goals and remember that everyone started somewhere. Then for the second piece of advice, I'd say definitely try to partner with a mentor. A mentor is a great sounding board to talk through situations, ideas, and feelings that you're having. They can provide perspective on where you are. So they can tell you whether maybe you are slower than someone typical in your role or faster. And they can also be someone to help go through the managing expectations we talked about before. They can also serve as role models. So I think for a lot of underrepresented groups, be it females or other underrepresented groups, there might not be many people who are in the positions that you're looking to get to. So more senior positions or specific roles. And so if your mentor is in that position, there's someone that you can look up to, and they can also help you define from where you are to where you want to be. And companies often provide mentorship and career development programs so that you can find mentors or build up your skill sets. One of which I took place, as you'll see in the logo on the right, at DoorDash is called WOLF, which is Women Leadership Forum. And this paired us with senior leaders and also helped us refine and work on our leadership skills. So in this talk, we've definitely gone over a lot of ways to overcome imposter syndrome. I just want to leave everyone with one of our values here at DoorDash, which is choose optimism and have a plan. I think if people can work on building a step-by-step plan and work through that, they can feel more confident in their role, take on new challenges to grow their skill sets and achieve their career goals. So thanks for listening today, and I'll pass it on to Ting, Janet, and Kathy.
Hey everyone, my name is Ting. Today, my colleagues Kathy, Janet, and I would like to talk about technical communications best practices in male-dominated work environment. Just a quick reminder that you can use the Q&A to ask questions if you have any. All right, so a little bit about myself. I came from a finance background, but decided to switch my career to tech 5 years ago. I currently work at DoorDash on the growth retention team, a team focusing on engagement and the retention of new and existing consumers. I want to start out by admitting that fortunately, the culture in tech industry has been improving. But still, there are challenges that underrepresented talents take into account, but men do not think about. So today, I'm going to talk about 3 challenges. 1, self-doubts. 2, unwelcome workplace culture. And 3, underrepresentation in decision-making. So the first 2 are more common for more junior engineers, and the last one are more common among senior engineers. Challenge number 1, self-doubts. So when I was in my early career, I barely spoke up, not to say give criticism to my male counterparts, which is a shame because, look what a convincing voice that I have. As a minority, I'm constantly worried that I would be judged as too aggressive, and if I were wrong, my failure would be put under the microscope. I'm telling this because although this is my lived experience, it's also the reality many other underrepresented engineers face every day early in their career. And the more silent we are, the less we may be able to do our best work. Challenge number 2, unwelcome working environment. One problem here is using gender terms. So think about how often we start our conversation by saying, hey guys, or referring to an interview candidate as he or she when the preferred pronoun is a no. So remember, gender terms can make an individual feel less inclusive and connected, even if you did not intend to act like that. The other problem here is unsupportive behavior. So now people talk about this a lot, but today I want to focus on more subtle problems that make people feel unwelcome. In my experience, I constantly hear stories like this. The team wants to order some swags and decides to go with the unisex sizing, even though they have the option to choose different sizes for each team member. The problem here is that unisex garments are sized based on men's measurement, and even the smallest unisex sizing barely fits well on females. And if the t-shirt literally doesn't fit you, then you may not feel welcome as a key member of the team. A couple years ago, I had this PR comments. This code does not make sense at all. It's basic knowledge. How can you not know? I don't know how it's possible, but when I read it, it literally felt as if the comments leaped through my screen and body slammed me onto my stack. The message was clear. You can write code, but your code is worthless and you know nothing. On second thought, I felt deeply confused. Did he even bother understand my point of view? Probably not. Did he explain why it did not make sense to him? No. How can I not know it is basic knowledge? Well, because I'm not you. So why am I telling these stories? Because we all need to be mindful of the disconnect between what most people prefer and what all people can do. So we don't lock out individuals out of social circles that are still predominantly male. And we all need to be more sensitive about how the message will be received, even though you feel like your relationship is at a stage that you could say that. Challenge number 3, underrepresentation in decision-making. Minorities stand out, and because of that, they tend to be more heavily scrutinized in the decision-making. What struck me most was that this is not just an issue for more budding engineers, and engineers at tops have challenges here as well. The problem aligns with what the data shows. Women are promoted to managers at far lower rates than men, and this makes women experience less allyship from more privileged colleagues. So the question here is, how are we going to fix this? And how do we make this different? Let's hear it from Cassie and Janet.
Thank you, Ting. So hi, everyone. My name is Cathy, and I'm here to talk to you about our suggestion to address the technical communication challenges Ting mentioned earlier. The first part I would like to talk about, as we can see in the next slide, we want to address the challenge number one. That was the self-doubt a lot of people facing when we want to communicate our thought. How can we confidently communicate our thought in the technical communication? And the second challenge Ting mentioned earlier, that is unwelcome workplace culture. So what are the actions we can take on improving the inclusion? As we can see at next slide, I want to define these two challenges, the challenges in self-doubt and two scenarios that happen in our day-to-day work as a software engineer. So where do those challenges manifest, especially for junior engineers? So in one of the important technical communication that happen in software development process is you are required to give code review to your peers. So if you have self-doubt, I believe that you will avoid giving any criticism because you are afraid of any pushback from your peers or engineers that you think more experienced than you. And also another self-doubt that can play into the role is when there is a lot of complex discussion under your pull request. How can you further the discussion and handle those complex discussion well? And another scenario in the technical communication is you are given the opportunity to lead a project. And with that self-doubt, you might hesitate to take ownership of a project, or is that fear of failures make it hard for you to make a timely decision on pushing your project timeline? So here are the suggestions we want to share for addressing the challenge of the self-doubt. So in the context of code review, the first thing we talk about would be focusing on the code rather than developer. In the example Ting mentioned earlier, the reviewer gave really harsh comment and also not respectful about why did she not know of a simple knowledge. So that was a really, really irrespectful comment because people put a lot of hard work in their code, and then people naturally feel defensive when getting negative feedback, especially if you are not giving a constructive one. So we want to be very careful, especially when giving criticism, to make sure the person who receives your feedback can see that as a very constructive and helpful gift rather than a personal attack. So I have an example here. Instead of saying, it's so hard to understand your code, you're pointing fingers to that person. How about we say that I'm having a little bit hard time following this part of code. Can you explain your approach? And then now is my opportunity to share my suggestion further. So in this approach, we want to respect the person, and then we don't want to avoid using terms that could be seen as referring to personal trait, like this is dumb code or stupid code. We want to make sure that the person don't get defensive when hearing our advice, and then we can further provide our suggestion on the code review. And then another scenario I mentioned earlier is that it's just a lot of discussion under your code review, and then there might be a lot of different opinions, because we always have to accept that the programming decisions are basically different opinions. So if you have already discussed the trade-offs and why you prefer in this approach in your PR comments, and then you still cannot reach to a resolution with all this reviewers leave comments on your pull request, then probably it's time for you to consider taking those one-on-one, taking those discussion into a one-on-one chats or video calls, because that one you can help to make sure you communicate your thought directly to the reviewer and then share your approach, and then also actively listen their suggestion in this one-on-one discussion. And basically what you can do after that discussion, once you reach a solution, you can post a follow-up comment summarizing your one-on-one discussion under your pull request and make sure everyone is on the same page and merge your call. So now you're on block and then you achieve something by finishing your pull request. Another scenario I talk would be leading the project. So the self-doubt in like leading your first project is definitely there, because I want to share my personal story. When I first given the opportunity to lead my first project, I was also nervous and I was worried about failure, but I still took that opportunity because my first project was able to, because my action, I took that opportunity. So I was able to gain valuable experience through leading my first project, and the project was on time, although the result was not perfect. There's always something I need to improve after the feature rollouts to production. So the reflection I have is, while you may be nervous about failure, it's better for you to just do your best and fake the confidence if you have to, since failure is okay and we are probably more qualified than we think. The next slide, as we can see, we will talk about the challenge number two, which is unwelcome workplace environment. So what are the actions we can take to improve the inclusion? So the first thing I would suggest is we want to build a network in your organization. You get allies and you also seek out mentorship opportunities and connection. So this one, I want to echo back about what Grace shared earlier. So there are mentorship programs in like, for example, in my organization, we have not just a mentorship program that train future leaders. They also have a mentorship program help junior developers get paired with more experienced senior level developers, and then they are able to use this mentorship opportunity to build connection and then learn from the experience from the senior developers. And then also there are employee resource groups that we can join to actually have those to network and socialize, and then also work on professional development. And also that is a place that we can safely share and raise awareness of relevant issues. Last but not least, I would say we want to advocate for ourselves and others. Here I have another story I can share from, actually it's a research paper from National Bureau of Economic Research. So women constantly raise their performance on the test lower than men, although both gender groups had the same average score. So why I share about this, I think women still self-promoted less than men, and then we could be much more capable than we think. So if we don't ask, we cannot have what we don't ask for. So probably what we should do is, like, for example, make our short-term goal and long-term goals known to your direct manager, and they can help you to align some opportunity and tasks that can further and build your career in your organization. Now I'm going to hand over the control to my colleague, Janet.
Thank you so much, Cathy. I hope we all learned a little bit more about building a network, advocating for yourself. Those were very useful topics for me as well. Leading up to the next part, leading as a URT. So how do you be effective as a minority? We covered some of these topics of building a network, of advocating for yourself, and let's dive more deeply into the issues of leading as a URT. The challenges around leading as a URT is that you are often underrepresented. So take myself, for example. This is about my 20+ year in technology. I started out in engineering school, being about 20 out of 200 women in the school. And now I'm a senior staff engineer. I'm the only woman, senior staff engineer at DoorDash. And throughout different careers, I've also been the only woman in the room, or I am the only Asian person in an industry. And the fact of the matter is, even as you're starting out a minority, The more senior you get, there are even less of you. And being a minority, being a URT, you have a unique perspective. And that often makes your perspective different. And that's great. That's diversity. That's why we have diversity. However, there's going to be fewer people who might, be already familiar with your perspective. Yet, as a senior person, you're expected to influence all of those people. You need to be able to steer the ship and get everyone to agree. So how does a URT lead effectively? Let's talk about more what are the challenges exactly when you're voicing a unique opinion? When you think about our structures that we have for resolving opinions, the way that these structures are built are, we take votes. We say majority rules. So majority, minority, and then we say, okay, well, let's take the majority choice. Let's forget about minorities. Well, that's not very inclusive, right? And then we have other structures where we try to take in everyone's perspective. I don't know if you've ever built an end-to-end system involving 10 plus teams. You ever built a house? It's very complex. And the thing is, you have to have a single point of view. You have to have a single thread in your design that makes it cohesive. And when you just say, well, we're going to take a little bit of everybody, what you end up with is, what I like to call Frankenstein decisions. So it's like a patchwork. It's a little bit of what everyone wants. It's nothing that anybody wants. In the next slide, we'll talk more about what do you do with a situation like that? So I think as a URT, one way, or as any leader, one way you can frame the problem is perhaps it's not about what the majority wants. It's not about the number of people. It's about doing the right thing. So looking for the right answer as opposed to making sure everyone agrees. After all, we are agreeing on the right thing as opposed to, trying to get a certain number. And if we're thinking about things in that frame of mind, what you tend to do is to realize, well, actually one solution is made up of a lot of solutions and perspectives. And we're always balancing trade-offs. There is no one right solution. You're probably changing solutions as you go along. The other thing is that when you have a unique opinion, and that's not what others see, when you introduce that, it can feel like you're trying to change everything from the ground up. It may be overwhelming for a group. I think the other thing that you can emphasize is that nothing needs to be done all at once. We don't need to boil the ocean. Every problem can be broken up into milestones and stages, and you can carry them out and achieve the same great end result. In the next section, I like to introduce some of my tips. This is a framework that's helped me over the years. And it's a 4-step program, if you will. I would say the first step is that you should give credence to your feelings. They are here to guide you. I think a lot of times when we're faced with the majority, we tend to say, well, I'll just forget about that one little nagging voice in my head. It doesn't matter if everybody else agrees, but you should pay attention to it. Your feelings are there to tell you what's right. And a lot of times your instincts as to what's fair are even more accurate than what you rationalize in long discussions. So definitely give credence to your feelings. The next step is getting in touch. Once you identify these feelings, kind of, listen to yourself. What is it that you really want? And if you've ever been in a long meeting, going for hours in circles, what you'll find is that what does the other side want? Can each side actually say what the other person is advocating for? So when you really lay out what it is that you want and you lay out what the others want, you'll be able to see what's intentional, what's not intentional, and that gives you space for mutual understanding. The progression from mutual understanding is that you'll be able to reframe. What you'll see is that it's often not about two sides, one against the other. It's about, this common ground and then a bunch of opposing small disagreements. So you want to establish that common ground, have a framework in which you can work around, and then isolate the points of contention. And that helps you, knowing that there's not one right answer, knowing that it's not one against the other side, helps you, relaxes you to working towards the problem. So the last thing I would leave you with is that to be a leader, the most important thing is to say what it is that you're leading. Yes, no, I agree, I disagree. You don't need to explain yourself. And this is what you're contributing to the group. And there's nothing I love more than when there's absolute clarity in the leadership. You know exactly where to go. So that is what you can give to the teams that you're leading, to the teams and efforts that you're leading. It's a gift. All right, thanks everyone. And next we'll have Radhika to tell us about how it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Hey everyone, and thank you, Janet. Hi all, my name is Radhika. I'm an engineering manager here at DoorDash, and I'm a part of the new verticals org leading the convenience and grocery picking team. And prior to this, I was leading the consumer growth, activation, and retention teams. It's been such a fun ride at DoorDash so far. I really love working in a fast-paced environment, which also values the work-life balance. I want to start by saying that today's topic, although focused towards women, is by no means only for women. So anyone who relates to these situations is very welcome to join in and chime in. Now, if you're working in a fast-paced environment, very frequently you might hear people saying that they are burned out. What does that really mean? How does that really happen, and how do we avoid it? Before we jump into these details, I want to reiterate, and what Grace really framed very well. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Our career is a marathon. So how do we use that framework or that perspective to avoid burnout? As you can see in this graph, on the x-axis, if you will, time management, communication, and external pressure can be on the x-axis, and the left axis, if you see performance on your left axis, you see if time management, communication, and external pressure are in balance, performance is at your optimal. However, if you go towards a little left on this graph, you see if you're focusing a lot on time management, communication, but there's not enough external pressure, it could mean that you are feeling underutilized, not challenged enough. And on the other hand, if you go lean towards the right of this, if time management and communication is not up to the mark, but there's lots of external pressure, it could highly likely lead to burnout. So how do we tackle this? There are certain things that are in control and that are not in control, right? External pressure is probably not in our control, but time management, communication is. A few examples very quickly that I would like to share is during the pandemic life. I'm very sure many of us will relate to this. I was a new mom, I was a new engineering manager then, and pandemic life was not going anywhere. So tackling my personal and professional, factors of life and, dealing with pandemic, I knew I had to take into control time management and communication. So I really use these two things to lead to a better work-life balance. Earlier in my career, I really learned a lesson of why communication is so important. There was a situation when I was leading a project and I felt I did not communicate well or did not call out risks very early, which led to a subpar quality feature and then also potential security incidents that could have happened. So I really learned this huge lesson of why communication is so important and asking for help is not a sign of weakness at all. So let's dive a little bit deeper. In the next slide, I would like to focus a little bit more on like how can you pace yourself and understand the different phases of your career. So a few important aspects: learning, people, accomplishments, understanding what accomplishments really mean to you. What are your North Star goals? What do you define accomplishments for yourself as? Now, if you see again in this graph, in your early career, a typical career, according to my perspective, would be learning is the most important in your early career, where you want to like soak in all the knowledge, ask questions, be curious, find the right mentors, listen. As you advance a little bit into your career, I think everything becomes equally important. However, people really stands out for me because building that right network, finding the right opportunities, being influenced by the right people, and also learning at the same time is super important at this stage. And then, of course, eventually you want to take these as stepping stones into your long-term career, where you want to make sure that you have accomplished what you were aiming and achieving, trying for. Now, if someone tries to put accomplishments too early, too soon, it could face, you could face burnout. This talk is really about creating like having good practices that will enable you to have a work-life balance, as well as, make sure that you achieve your accomplishments long term. So as you can see in in the next slide, like I would like to double click on what work-life balance means to us. So if you can see in the next slide. What does work-life balance really mean to you, right? I think a very textbook definition in the next slide I've just stated is that creating a personal state of equilibrium where you can achieve balance between your personal and professional goals and really be happy and healthy, right? Well, what does it really mean to you? For me, as you can see in the next slide, flexibility is the key. Understanding what work-life balance means is super important. If you're a woman, URT, or a new mom, new spouse, whatever phase of personal life you might be in, your work-life balance might be very different from someone else on your team, and that is totally okay, absolutely okay. I think acceptance and understanding that is the key. As I mentioned, flexibility is what means work-life balance for me. Being a mom of a 4-year-old, I think I really have to focus on him, in the first 2 hours in the morning, and then once he's back from school. So I really have to, separate out those personal, hours for myself. And I really value flexibility in that sense. Having this flexibility for myself and also working with folks on my team who have different schedules is kind of a day-to-day, job for me, and I love it. Now, in the next slide, assuming that we have defined what work-life balance means to us, let's see how can we achieve it. Three key things I would say. As I mentioned earlier, there are things that you can control. So I would really bucket it into 3 sections. One is communication, time management, and really taking it forward by fostering the right culture. Now, let's talk about how can we have like an effective and outward communication. So in the next slide, we can see kind of dividing this again into, how can we achieve effective communication? First and foremost, setting your boundaries, super important. I feel if you help yourself, if you help yourself, it goes a long way. Block your calendar. Some tactical things that I do is like block your calendar for those personal hours and, push back very clearly with whatever is outside your working hours. However, even more important is to communicate this out effectively. I feel it is a great idea to first talk to your manager and let them know why this is important to you, how your personal responsibilities weigh on you. Sharing with your manager the confidence that you work much more productively by blocking time or, having your co-working hours, it goes really a long way. Also, if you're comfortable, definitely share this with your peers. So, you're setting the right expectations. Not very often talked about is something I'll share, which is very personal to me. Hopefully it helps someone. So I would like to share is also communicating this out, in your personal space, which is like, it could be a spouse, partner, family. I felt it was really important to communicate very clearly what my professional and personal goals are, even with my family, so that everyone is aligned and in sync. Just a small thing that me and my husband always did was, like, we had a deal that only one of us can work in a fast-paced environment or a startup, so the other one can actually focus on family, home needs, and kids, of course. So that really has helped me so far, to the both of us, honestly. And last but not the least, an example that I shared earlier, I just want to reiterate, definitely call out risk as early as possible. If you're, owning a particular, feature delivery or, whatever in your space, definitely call out risk as early as possible. Don't take the issues that you're facing personally. Use your team to solve them effectively. Also, I would say, the second thing that we talked about, right? The second key thing, if you see on the next slide, what are the best practices of time management? I feel time management is a huge lever into building the right work-life balance. So a few things that work for me in the next slide that I have presented is having a plan, right? Having an intent is super, super important. Having a North Star goal of what you want to achieve, in the day is super important. Like having that structure in place. It could be for the day, for the week, month, however you want to plan. For me, for example, in a day, I love to see that for myself, I am, able to tackle the people side of things, obviously technical side of things, and also product and data, like how are we measuring our business impacts and stuff. To tackle this, I have like a running to-do list. Very important to prioritize that to-do list very frequently and also track the progress. Striking off an achievement in your to-do list, it's a great feeling. And the irony is, right, if you're working in a very fast-paced environment, very, very often things keep changing very rapidly. So I would say don't hesitate to take an action in, kind of strike off, move on if something is not relevant anymore. Having that, attitude of being flexible and fluid is super important if you're working in a fast-paced environment. Now in the next slide, I also want to talk about, something that many of us can feel when you're working in a global setting with, your teammates scattered across different time zones. Was an example again, like in my previous job, I had to briefly work with folks in the Argentina time zone. So how did we as a team honestly increase productivity even with cross-time collaborations was kind of defining core working hours. So we defined like 5 hours that work very well for both the ends. So none of us had to stay up too late or work too early. We tried to keep like all the important meetings in those core working hours. If not possible, record those meetings or shared outward notes in public channels. That really helped us resolve all the issues that we faced within the same 24 hours, rather than having that domino effect of taking those issues onto the next day. Next slide, last but not the least, the third aspect of this is, right, how do you take this forward? How do you really try to incline towards a better work-life balance within your team and not just like for you? So on the next slide, 2 things I would say: be an ally and create awareness. I think we've heard, Grace and I guess Cathy also and Ting talk about like, how important it is to have allies and have that network, strong network of people you trust to, stand along with you. Be that ally for someone. Definitely help them feel more included, more visible, give them the right opportunities when you see that potential. Create awareness by maybe, talking with your manager if you have some ideas, like, those core working hours, for example, that I talked about. Share those ideas with your manager, see how you can actually influence them across the team. If you're in a leadership role, I love to say that lead by example. Take breaks yourself, take vacations, and you can actually show that you're more productive when you take these breaks. On that note, I also want to say in the next slide, try to make work fun. It is super important that, and it's a very crucial part, that you don't feel too overwhelmed and try to feel work as a fun part of your life. And that's really very important to feel like productive and staying at peace mentally. So the next slide, a few things that really helps me be the best productive self at work is continuing on my personal goals and hobbies. I love dancing personally. I really feel like completely de-stressed in those 16 minutes. I'm not thinking about like being a mom, being an engineering manager, or any other role that I play in my life. And it's a complete stress buster. What's more important is once I have that me time for myself, or whatever personal goals that I've set for myself, once I'm able to achieve those, I go back with a huge sense of energy and enthusiasm. So it really brings my productive self back. It's kind of my secret to instant happiness. Second thing, kind of cliched, but again super important, like take well-deserved breaks and take mental breaks, like get up from your desk, drink some water, walk around. I feel that really has helped me stay focused when I come back to my desk. And again, last but not the least, work not like work, meaning it shouldn't feel like a core. I really believe it's important to feel motivated when you go back to work. If there is anxiety associated in any form of any part of your work, I would highly recommend talk to your allies that you've built, your peers, and most importantly your manager, on how you can achieve on resolving those issues, so you can actually fix them and feel good about going back to work. As a mom, I really look forward to Mondays. But yeah, on that light note, I would like to thank everyone for bearing with me through this whole presentation, and I hope this helps someone in one or the other way. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for the great presentations. And thank you to the guests also. Thank you for being here. It's great to see you all here. We have a lot of engagement in the Q&A panel. We answered some of these live, and as well as we will be talking to the presenters directly to answer a lot of these questions. We have a number of questions coming in for about mentorship, about code reviews. Let's see, I'm going to start off from the top of the questions that we said to answer live. There is a question with respect to the second talk, which is so Ting and Cathy. Have you noticed that your code review comments as a female /URT are taken less seriously or passed on without fixing, as opposed to code comments from male counterparts? Any tips for overcoming this?
Anna probably can take this question. So I want to understand why your male counterparts will pass it or without answering it. So sometimes the problem could be, he or she wouldn't understand your question, or he was engaged with some other tasks that he wouldn't have time to do so. So if that was the case, I would probably sync with him or her offline to understand his perspective of view. If he intentionally do that, then I think the next step you could do is probably escalate this problem to involve tech leads or a manager into the conversation, so we can resolve these issues as soon as possible. Cassie, you want to add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Ting, on answering that question. I think we have another similar question that maybe on the further question, the next question I can answer further for that. I think another participant asked how we can deal with the constant pushbacks and impediments on ideas or work from colleagues. So that is not specifically, to the male counterpart or male colleague. It's just a general thing. So I would say that it's important we ask the question first. You want to understand, show like you're trying your best to understand their perspective. And I think another important thing is you want to communicate that you also share the similar goals, right? You're on the same team, you want to achieve or deliver the best product or the most reliable feature. So I think with that communication, you are trying to show that you're willing to resolve this together and try to find a common ground. So I think it's very important to just communicate on you share the same goal as well. So that's my thought.
Hey, thank you so much for those answers. Sorry, I was just typing some another answer. We've got some answers about how to get allies. I think I added this for Grace, as well as I think we can hear from some of the other panelists. So Grace, why don't we start with you? How do we build a network of like-minded tech women outside your workplace?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say that, at least in my personal experience, I have found most of my mentors through the workplace. And I'm just wondering if this question comes from maybe thinking that you want to build outside of the company that you work at. What I will say is that I think companies are good starting points with a lot of the resources that they have. And given that people move jobs quite frequently, it actually becomes that people you meet in your current company will move on to other roles and could be your into other companies. So I'd say that if your focus right now is trying to find outside your company, I think it still is worth looking at your company because people will move on. I guess, but looking outside of the workplace, I think ways that I've found people are generally if you have friends that work in the industry or friends of friends, those are good ways. If you, as Radhika mentioned, like have hobbies outside of work, you might meet people naturally through that also work in the industry and can be a good way to just meet people who work at other companies. And I think I've also leveraged like my alumni network from college and people I've met through school. And then I think there are more specific external programs. So as I mentioned in the Wolf program that I took part of at DoorDash, they did allow us to work with a company called West, like it's all capital letters like West, and they have like mentors from many other companies. And I think that's also a way to find mentors and meet people outside of your current company.
I'd like to add one more point there. Thank you so much, Grace. I think you put that very well. What has also helped me personally is actually making time to build that network. I feel that's also super important to kind of, make some time on your calendar to actually reach out, hear other people's stories, share your stories. And that's how kind of the bonding starts. So just wanted to plug that in.
Yeah, I've got another variation of that question. And Cathy, you've also talked about, building a network. So the question is, what are some of the ways in which a software engineer can build a good network? How does one start? What does it mean to have a good network? Cathy?
Yeah, sure. I'm just reading through the question. So can you, is this the current open question? I'm not seeing that question on the Q&A this yet. Can you repeat that question one more time for me?
What are some of the ways? What are some of the ways in which a software engineer can build a good network, and how does one start? What does it mean to have a good network?
So the ways I personally actually got some good connection through attending some conferences. So a lot of right now, I know a lot of tech conferences, they are still, virtual online conferences. But before the pandemic, I actually attended a lot of in-person tech conferences, and I was able to chat with other engineers I met, and then we attended, like similar session, listened to the same talk, and then we talk about what was our learning after listening to talk. And then those people there, like I really met them in person and then create a linking connection there. We are not just like I reach out to linking and then was able to build that connection. So I think a lot of time tech conferences, because you have the similar interest to join that tech conferences and have like learn maybe similar background. For example, maybe this tech conference is about security, and then you can exchange your thoughts and your experiences on building those security software security features. And I think that is a great timing for you to actually build connection and share your experiences. And usually, people are working at different tech companies, so that will help you to build the network outside of your company. Yeah, I think that's my answer, and feel free to jump into and add more points on top of this.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. We've gone through a few questions about how do you build a network, what's a good quality network. I'm gonna go to some of our other questions about, so we have one here from Jessica about how do you take time for learning to improve in your job, but prevent yourself from burning out. So I know, Radhika, you had some great tips for us. I'm gonna go to you for this question.
Sure. Yeah. I think first of all, I would say understanding that definitely you cannot be doing all at once. So I think accepting the fact that don't set too harsh deadlines or, achievements or North Star goals for yourself. Being realistic is definitely a good starting point. And then, as I mentioned, communication. I think that's a key here. Prioritization is also a key here, right? You're the best judge at a point where, if you're working on an aggressive, deadline project, for example, you want to make sure that you're also not like, dealing with something that is, taking classes, which also has some quizzes around the same time. So I think prioritizing and making time for equal time and giving right amount of time for both of those aspects is super important. How do you do that is, I have in the past definitely talked to my manager about it and let them know in advance, like, hey, this is kind of a 3-month course. I would love to join, and this is going to be in this time frame. So they are aware in advance, and it's not a surprise for either of us. So yeah, I think I would definitely recommend doing that. So again, to highlight, like, communication and prioritization is how I would, tackle this problem and definitely not be burnt out.
Thank you, Radhika. While we have you, we've got some questions for managers on this talk. So we can, this is kind of related to the code review topics that we talked about earlier, but it's how do managers help fix the harsh code review reviews and comments? How do we make sure that we have a good work culture when we have a few colleagues who constantly give harsh comments? I know this is Ting and Cathy talked about this a little bit. Do you have a point of view on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just share one point, and definitely Ting and Cathy, please add on. I have heard this a lot of times, and I really, really relate to the fact that when something goes wrong, definitely don't blame the person, but blame the process, right? So I feel like there's definitely room for improvement when something like this is ongoing, like there are harsh comments, people are able to deal with it, set a process in place. Again, that it doesn't have to be like a huge overhead of, on top of reviewing, because reviewing itself is a process. So set a process in place. Like if you feel like, for example, someone is not comfortable, some things are going wrong, I would definitely intervene as a manager and say, like, let's have this conversation offline. Like, let's set up like maybe a 15-minute meeting and, discuss face to face. I really feel like reading comments offline, people can judge it to have a different tone. Maybe the person on the other side doesn't really have that tone, but sometimes we assume there's a certain tone to it. So I really want to remove all that, all those unknowns, and instead have like a face-to-face conversation. That definitely helps. So again, a process does not have to happen each and every time, but wherever we feel important, I would definitely kind of plug that in. But yeah, Ting and Cathy, anything you want to add?
No, I think Radhika, you covers everything that I want to say. Nothing to add here.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming. I really enjoyed this talk. Thank you all the panelists for being here. It was very informative and a great learning opportunity.